This podcast is brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. Funny Bone Broth sources bones locally from a farm just north of Toronto. They use organic vegetables, quality ingredients, and small batch production. It's low in fat, low in sodium, high in protein, and high in delicious flavor. Check them out at funnybonebroth.com.
In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast. My name's Ben Grant. I'm joined today by JB. How's it going?
It's going well.
Better than the Argos season?
Better than Ottawa's season, not as good as the Argos season.
Okay. So today what we thought we'd do is break down, I guess take a look at like who we want back and start taking a look at coaches. We'll focus in on offense today, and we'll save defense for next time. Right off the top, I guess we're looking at Chamberlain. You bring him back or no?
No, I mean, you and I have talked about this. I don't think anybody comes back. I'm
from the team or just the coaching staff?
From the coaching staff.
Okay.
Okay.
There's going to be a lot of spots if we're saying like everybody. Okay.
I don't want to use the word purge, but I think it's time to purge.
But that's not unusual for a coaching staff. You see it a little less in the CFL, but often when the head coach is replaced, it's you end up with a full switch of the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, it in some ways it's really hard to evaluate because so many of the Argos' second half of the season was against garbage Ottawa and teams that weren't trying very hard against us. And so it's difficult to get a real read on the team, but I guess my comparison would be Montreal and Toronto played in Moncton and were essentially the same team. And from that point forward, Toronto was a slightly better Ottawa, and Montreal, although they got knocked out, was a playoff team. And I just didn't see anything in the second half of the season that was encouraging offensively. I didn't see anything creative, even when they had nothing to lose.
That's the thing, like so many times where, again, we've already been eliminated from the playoffs. It's 3rd and 2 at midfield, and you think, well, let's go for it. Let's take a chance. Like, what are we saving it for? And you look at those last 5 games. You cancel out those 2 Ottawa games. Hamilton was playing their backups. Montreal was playing a couple backups, but you could just see they weren't, and they weren't there. They didn't bring the same level of intensity that they had been, and yet we still lost that Montreal game, still lost that Hamilton game. But the BC game is maybe a good litmus test because and maybe that tells us everything we need to know because we got absolutely blown out in that game against a team that was on paper pretty much as bad as the Argos. I think they had already been eliminated from the playoffs when they ran up 50 points on us. And so if you look at that as the game where you kind of decide, are we keeping the staff around or not, obviously that doesn't speak very highly of Chamberlain and his group.
No, and I understand that consistency is what makes great teams great. The fact that Calgary never changes their coach is one of the reasons why Calgary is good. But that can only begin when you have the right person. I don't think you keep people because you believe consistency is the key. Good consistency is the key.
I would be fine with... So my proposal for this is, I agree with you that I think there needs to be a change at head coach, and I would be very surprised if that doesn't happen. I can only assume the reason it hasn't happened yet is because they don't have a plan B in place yet. So I have to assume, optimistically perhaps, that we're waiting around until Mike O'Shea becomes available or can at least be talked to. Obviously, he's a bit busy right now. But that's the only reason I hope that a move hasn't been made yet, because I feel like if we go into next season with the exact same coaching staff in place, that we're going to end up with a very similar season to what we saw this year.
Do you think Winnipeg winning this weekend increases or decreases the chances the Argos can steal O'Shea?
Decreases. I think the more Winnipeg wins, the more likely the organization is to give him whatever he wants.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like it's harder to walk away from a team after a playoff loss like that than it is if you put together a run.
I think if they win the whole, like if Winnipeg wins the Grey Cup, then I do think then that's when I could see him walking away. Because from Winnipeg's standpoint now, they don't need to pay him. They just won the Grey Cup. They can now sort of have a celebration, a big party. I think there's less pressure on them. I think if they get to the Grey Cup and don't do it, I don't think there's much chance that he leaves at that point.
Yeah, in the end, I think O'Shea's, is a false dream. I don't think there's any chance O'Shea comes to Toronto. Why would you? I mean, unless they opened up a vault of money, why would you leave Winnipeg to coach? Who's going to be that roster? I mean, a completely reconstructed roster.
Well, we've got changes at the top already, so you've got Pinball running things, and I could see that under, with the former front office staff, I could see you saying that. But there are a lot of draws, like the cities themselves. I'm not a huge fan of Winnipeg as a city, as a place to live. In my experience, it's either minus 50 or I'm getting bitten by mosquitoes. And in terms of cities, I would take Toronto over just about everywhere. But if you're given control, if you're given the same level of control in Toronto that you're given in Winnipeg, if you have, which I believe he does, have a good relationship with Pinball, and that's something he feels good about, and Pinball has a plan, and he's going to bring in players, and he's got a vision that O'Shea shares, or maybe he says, to O'Shea, what's your vision? Will you come in here? And we'll give you the freedom to bring in who you like. I would see that as a draw.
Yeah. I think that's the only possibility, is that they give him. I'm not sure what his player personnel power is currently in Winnipeg. So if they give him more power in terms of the selection of players and more money, I mean, in the end, like, this is one of those things where, Lewicki proved for MLSE is the quickest way to turn a team from a loser into a winner is go find the smartest guy and give him a ton of money and absolute power.
And they are a little bit limited in that now, in a way that they didn't used to be, in terms of paying coaches. Because I think, and I'm not sure, I think if Chamberlain is still on the books for one more season, which I believe he is, I believe that money actually counts.
Against the cap?
Yeah, I think it actually counts in terms of how much can then be offered. I got to look that up, but I think that will be one of the sticking points. They can't just lay down $5 million for him and
maybe we could listen to a podcast about the CFL.
Yeah. Maybe if we had two guys that knew what they were talking about, that would be quite helpful.
That's the kind of valuable information you're getting.
Yeah.
Questions. Well,
yes.
we just raised the questions. It's really up to you, the listener.
You go do the research
to find these answers.
Yes. No, but I think that's the situation. Now, back to the Argos coaches for a second. How would you feel about a situation? Because I actually quite like Jacques Chapdelaine as an OC, and I know we're talking very hypothetically here, but if we were to bring O'Shea in, who's a defensive guy, how would you feel about keeping Chapdelaine as your OC?
It's hard to say. I don't know how much freedom he is given on that staff. It's always difficult to know whether an offensive coordinator is being held back by a coach who wants things to be very conservative. But my feeling is we should look. I mean, as you look at the CFLization of the NFL and how the CFL is really moving more and more towards CFL-style plays, They don't have the receivers in motion, but I mean, it's a faster league than it's ever been, and it's more a passing league. And when I look at the teams that are great in the NFL, they're innovative and they're stealing from smart coaches and they're throwing things at other teams that they're not prepared for. And when I look at the mediocre teams, who will go unnamed, who are at the end of the QEW, those teams are boring and run static offenses and punt the ball and run in the middle on the goal line and are not doing anything innovative. And that's what I need from the Argos. I don't need them to win 12 games next year, but I need them to push the envelope, to look like they've read a book. Have you read a book about offense? Or are you just using the binder you had from 2002?
But I think we saw this year from Chapdelaine, especially when he started bringing in the two young guys, Prukop and O'Connor. He seemed to really cater his play calling to their strengths, and that's something. He's been coaching a long time, and he has adjusted in his style. He's got a far different offense now than what he used to run. And when he brought in Prukop and O'Connor, we saw him do things that gave them advantages. With Prukop, we saw him really take advantage of Prukop's mobility, his ability to scramble around, to throw on the run. And he set up plays for O'Connor where they had max protection, where O'Connor's really got one or two guys to focus in on or one read to make and throw that ball downfield. And so, it wasn't necessarily, he wasn't doing any magic tricks or anything like that, but it showed to me his willingness and his to be flexible. And I think that's half the fight there.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on who is the quarterback next year.
Well, but that's the thing too. Like, you look at the job Chapdelaine did this year. He came into the season designing an offense for James Franklin. That was, Franklin was going to be the guy. Here's our offense for James Franklin. Then suddenly McLeod Bethel Thompson takes over, and now, in a very different set of strengths. And then we've got Prukop and O'Connor that comes in. It's four different quarterbacks with four very different styles that he had to cater to. And obviously he didn't come into the season back in the spring thinking, I'm going to come to the table with four different offenses. So that's him thinking on the fly. I feel like this is a guy that if he knows, maybe he won't next year, but if he knows who his guy is going to be for the whole season, then it's a guy that I can have some faith in. Now, that being said, if any head coach comes in and doesn't want him, then I don't think you argue to keep him. I hate when you see that in no matter what league. When you bring in a new head coach, I believe that head coach should have the power to bring in or get rid of whoever he wants. And if the owners, the general manager says, no, we really like this guy as the offensive line coach or as the special teams coach or whatever it is, I believe that the head coach should have that power. And obviously that's something that's discussed in interviews. What sort of freedom will I have to bring in my people, my staff? And I don't know what O'Shea's relationship is like with Chapdelaine, but if we were to bring in O'Shea and he says, no, I want my staff in here, then I think he should have that ability to bring in his people.
Yeah, in some ways, maybe big-time Div 1 football is a better comp than the NFL to CFL football in terms of the volatility of it and how quickly things can change.
Sure, well, no one's getting poached from the NFL coaching staffs.
No.
Or at least far less. I guess you lose the occasional coordinator to a head coaching job.
But if you look at, I think it's such a valuable or such an important decision. You look at LSU, who had the unfortunately named Canada as their OC, and he was terrible. And now they have a new OC, and they're absolutely elite. And, of course, they have a good quarterback. But
they have good everything.
But they always had good everything. And I just think...
I think that's hard to gauge, though. You look at, not to turn this into an NCAA podcast, but I don't know if the things they went after, you look at the comparison, we talked about the LSU-Alabama game that you just saw over the weekend, which was a shootout. But the last time those two teams played ranked 1 and 2, it was a 9-6 game because both of their philosophies have changed. So back in like 2011, LSU and Alabama are both trying to play smash-mouth, defense-first football because they can basically choose whoever they want. And I'm not sure how much of that is coordinators. Maybe it is. I don't know enough to know. But I feel like they're recruiting because, again, those two schools can pretty much take whoever they want in the country. And I think now they're taking really fast receivers, smart quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks that can get the ball out quickly, whereas back then it was game control quarterbacks they were looking at, bright game control guys. Their priority was on defense, and that's why you had that 9-6 score as opposed to scores up in the 50s that you're seeing with both of those offensive now. So I don't know. I don't know if that is coordinator related. It might be.
I think where I see this as such a huge offseason for the Argos is that model that has been used for the other MLSE teams, where you find somebody who is incredibly smart, incredibly progressive, and give them all the power and all the money, and then step back. And I just need the Argos to find their Masai, their Tim Bezbachenko, their Brendan Shanahan / Kyle Dubas. That's who they need. Now, I don't think it's pinball, but I think pinball is the facilitator.
Well, I don't think pinball thinks it's pinball.
No, I agree. That's who they have to find. They have to find the guy who is going to bring an analytical eye and a completely different team-building philosophy for the next 10 years. I think this hire is absolutely huge if they're going to get off this, conveyor belt of we're good and then we're not good for a long time and then we're good. And then it's just so difficult to build any momentum without the guy. And I just think this offseason is maybe the most important in Argos history.
So, all right, let's talk about some players now. So, I think we've come to an agreement that we'd like to see Chamberlain replaced. We'd like to see somebody brilliant brought in as sort of a GM figure that Pinball finds to sort of replace himself. We're, I guess, open to pretty much changes at every other coaching spot. We're going to talk about offense today. Let's talk about quarterbacks. So we have 4 quarterbacks currently on the roster of the Toronto Argonauts. Do you want to see any of them in double blue next year?
Well, there's only 2 on the roster next year, per the new rules.
Right, which I think is designed to spread the wealth a little bit, but I think it's actually going to hurt quarterbacks like Michael O'Connor, who may not get a shot with only 2 QBs.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, I hate to be so widely dismissive of everybody who played for the team this year. You love Macbeth more than I.
I think I didn't. I was ready to abandon him, and then I felt like I saw something, albeit against.
You did see something. You saw Chad Henne.
I did see Chad. No, but I saw him play very well in games where we lost. Now, what sort of got me thinking a little bit is that I've gone through a few phases. So I was really upset with him earlier in the season, and then I felt like he was actually playing better and improving and making some good reads, and I felt like the mistakes on offense weren't mistakes that I was attributing to him. But then recently I've started going back and watching some of those early season games, and it wasn't good. A lot of his touchdowns and yards came in garbage time where we were down by 40 points, and suddenly he throws 3 touchdown passes, and that's how he ends up, leading the league in touchdown passes at the end of it. I think that is a bit misleading, but I'm certainly higher on him than you are. I don't think he's my target, but I think if we end up with him, I think that's okay.
He's got a good arm. Obviously, that's why he's kicked around this long. But to me, that's not who I want. That's not the CFL revolution that I'm looking for.
So you want more mobility,
right? I mean, look at I don't want to say Lamar Jackson, but I want something totally different. What I don't want, I think, in the CFL, let's not have this statue back there who throws deep fly balls that are decent. I want somebody who's going to scare the heck out of the other team. If your quarterback doesn't scare the other team, then what are you doing? I think they should go find. Now it's going to be harder because mobile quarterbacks are becoming more of the flavor everywhere.
Certainly, it would have been easier to find a guy like this. Like, because 10 years ago, Lamar Jackson might not be on a football team.
Yeah, I think that's what I want. I want a kid who can challenge both aspects of the defense. Anybody who's ever been involved in coaching knows that a running quarterback is a nightmare, especially if the running quarterback can throw decently.
But that's the key. Like, it's so hard to find a guy who poses a threat with his legs but can also throw accurately enough to be passing the ball 8 out of 10 downs because it's the CFL and you got to throw.
Yeah, I think they have to go. They have to go looking. They have to bring somebody into camp.
So you're saying someone that's not currently on a CFL roster, you've got to
right.
go south and
find them, bring them in, and build around them because the team needs a jolt of excitement.
See, I was very high on Dakota Prukop in the limited action that we saw. We saw him play all of 3 quarters over 2 games against Hamilton's backups and Ottawa. And I really liked what I saw from him. Not enough to say, let's make him the guy. He should be our starter next year. But I really want to take another look at him next season because he has mobility. He's not Lamar Jackson, but he can move around the pocket really well. We saw him convert first downs with his legs. A pretty aggressive quarterback when it comes to running the football. But he's also got some really nice touch. He connected in that last game with Hamilton, had a beautiful pass to Rodney Smith. He seems, I guess he did get, sometimes he got a little bit of tunnel vision, but for the most part, I think he's got, pieces that we can work with here, and he has that mobility that you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, in my dream scenario, you're bringing somebody in who is going to electrify the crowd down at BMO, and somebody the city can get behind. I think the city is keen to get behind a star.
Well, that might not be Dakota Prukop. Like, I don't think he's a star. I don't think he's going to be the guy on the poster next season that's going to sell the building out.
No, I don't want him.
But would you be okay with him as a backup? If he's the guy behind, because backups, he's probably going to get in. If he's a backup quarterback in this league, that means he's starting like 6 games.
Well, I guess I would leave it.
Well, you're going to bring more guys into camp, and maybe you can settle it that way. But I like him. I think there's enough. I think I've seen enough in Prukop that makes me say I want him to get a fair shot next year at the starting job, but probably more realistically as the backup quarterback. And I'm with you on bringing in somebody with mobility. I think that's a lot harder to find than you're making it sound.
I don't know how hard they're looking, is my question. I don't necessarily believe that organizations filled with football guys actually believe that they want that kind of quarterback. I think that bias is still deeply ingrained in boring, conservative football minds.
Oh, it depends who you've got. Like, you're talking about, this goes back to our GM conversation, though, but if Pinball brings in a decision maker who is willing to take chances, that fits hand in hand, obviously, with finding the quarterback you're looking for.
Yes. To me, again, it's all on finding that person who can evaluate correctly and move forward. And then we don't need Mike O'Shea.
I still want Mike O'Shea.
He's not coming.
His name's on the flag in the end zone. How could he say no to that? Like, to look up every day, every time you have a home game, look up and there's your name in the building.
Yeah, the only hope we have is Pinball's in a room with him.
And I don't discount the value of that. Pinball is a very convincing man. Like, there's no one that makes you feel more important, no matter who you are, than when you're in a room with Pinball. And I think he sits down with Mike O'Shea. I could see Mike agreeing to whatever Pinball says, because he's magic. All right, let's talk about the backfield. So running backs that we've currently got. So in terms of, we had Brandon Burks early in the season. He got hurt. AJ Ouellette, who we saw, he was, I guess, practice squad most of the season, and then we saw him in the last couple of games. Chris Rainey, we saw. James Wilder Jr., we saw. They recently signed Bishop Sankey. We didn't get a chance to see him yet. That I find kind of interesting. Because we remember Bishop Sankey. He's 27 now, and I was excited about him as a rookie when he was on my fantasy team, and never got onto the football field. But he's an interesting guy because he's got that skill set. He's exciting, or was like 7 years ago in college. He's 27 now. Like, let's see what he has. But so those are running backs, and then we've got the two fullbacks on the roster. Reggie Sibassou and Declan Cross, both Canadian kids, who I think, I just think, in terms of fullbacks, I think you keep both those guys around. I think they're great. Sibassou, I know we didn't see very much, but he was awesome. He won a Vanier Cup, I think, with Montreal, and it was an excellent receiver, but he's also put on some weight now, and we haven't seen him on the field very much. It was mostly Cross, but those are guys that you can put at tight end. You can put them at fullback. I don't think I would go searching for a fullback, but unless you disagree with me, like, why don't we talk about the running backs? Yeah, no,
I think that's fine. I think keep the fullbacks. They're, a blunt instrument, and the ones they have are fine. I think it's good to have fullbacks.
And both those guys are comfortable lead blocking or running routes as a tight end. Like, Sibassou's a great receiver. Cross is a bit more of a blocker, but he's good too. He can catch the ball out of the backfield or from the tight end spot.
Yeah, I guess, what did you make of this season with the running backs?
Well, I like Wilder a lot, and I don't know why he wasn't used more. And I don't know. To me, it feels like I feel like he's gone. Just reading some of the things he's written on social media, it sounded to me like he was saying goodbye. And I think that can only be because he is frustrated with the way he was used, that either he felt he needed to be used more or differently. And I don't know why we would, at the end of the game, look at the stat sheet and find that Wilder had 5 carries for 58 yards, and that was it. And why you're not running him more. I feel he's among the better running backs in the league.
Yeah, certainly I have very distinct memories of watching Wilder standing widely open in the flats, waving madly at a quarterback who had his back to him.
That was his go-to move.
And I never understood it either. I didn't know whether he was injured or why the team felt like they shouldn't build an offense around their best offensive player.
I don't know if I would go as far to say he's our best offensive player, but I think he's in the conversation.
Who would you put over him? Green?
As a possession receiver, he is, but I think it's easier to find a possession receiver. I think Walker probably, but then he was hurt at the end of the season. We didn't really get to see him too much, but Darrell Walker I thought was, we spent a lot of money to bring him in, and I thought he looked like an all-star when we were down 40-0. And whereas Wilder Jr. didn't look like an all-star this year because he was only getting 5 carries a game, so he was never given that opportunity. But I think both of those guys are in the conversation as most outstanding player, and I think you can put Green in there just because he's awesome at what he does. But I think what he does is something that a lot more people do than what James Wilder Jr. and Darrell Walker do.
I would love to bring Wilder back. If he's going to be used properly, I think that he is, I think that he's a good receiver. I think that or at least he's a decent receiver for a running back.
And none of these guys are super young, right? Like Wilder's 27. Sankey, well, I don't even, maybe we can't even talk about Sankey because we haven't seen him at all yet, but he's 27. Burks is 26. O.J. Olette is the only young running back that we've got at 24, but I don't think I like him, but I don't think he can be your guy. So, maybe it's time to start looking at bringing in somebody younger, because you don't see running backs typically get a lot better after 27.
No. But to me, I feel the running back position is overvalued. I think that if you construct an offense that is smart and fluid, then you can plug guys in and they're going to be successful. I mean, there are certain running backs that will be successful no matter what, but they're hard to find, and I don't think it's worth chasing them because you don't need them if you have an offense that is well built. You can puck guys in there, and they're going to get you yards. They're going to get you 4 or 5 yards because the defense can't tee off on you. And as long as the defense can't tee off on you, most times guys are going to be able to get some yards.
I didn't feel like we had teams stacking the box against us this year. I just felt like I didn't feel like we were getting the blocking from the offensive line to maybe justify running the football 20 times a game. But at the same time, I felt like we could have run more than we did.
Yeah. The offensive line, is always a problem on any poor team. Those two facts are usually pretty related. The offensive line needs to be improved.
Well, why don't we go there after? Well, so maybe we can move to O-line now and then wrap up with receivers. But I'm not convinced that there's anybody on the O-line that absolutely needs to. Like if you made me pick 10 players on the team that needed to come back, I'm not sure any of those are offensive linemen. There was nobody on the line this year I saw where I said, well, we've got to bring that guy back. Now, that being said, I thought McEwen did a pretty good job at center. But beyond that, Cage was hurt early in the season. He was playing left tackle, and then kind of after that, we had a variety of guys. You had Randy Richards and Jamal Campbell, both playing the tackle spots, and they're fine. But the problem is all 5 of our linemen were fine at best, and that's not good enough. Like, you can deal with having maybe 2 guys that are fine on your O-line as long as you've got 3 guys that are great. And we had an entire line of guys that were fine or poor.
Yeah, they definitely need to find at least one veteran anchor for that line. You're not going to be able to rebuild the line overnight.
That's the problem. Like, how do you fix this line in one offseason?
Well, players become available in the CFL much more than the NFL.
No, it's true. And there's certainly a lot more movement.
I think, you're going to have to splash out some money and get at least, I think you start with adding 2 linemen to that group.
And to be fair, if we're talking about continuity, this wasn't a unit that looked like they had been playing cohesively together for years anyway. Because even at the end of the season, we saw so many occasions where there were busts in communication, where the line didn't know how to respond to a blitz, and we had blitzers running free through the A-gap because there was no communication down the line. So I guess if that's what we're worried about is continuity, maybe we scrap that concern because it didn't look like we had any to begin with.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in they don't need to go find 5 road graders. If they could add one veteran who who can go out there and knows the CFL, can run that room, can be the guy we can run behind. I think that's enough for now. I mean, I think that should be a target. I think that they need to add a name on that line, and then figure it out from there.
All right, for the receiving core, I think the receiving core is the strongest of all the groups, the offensive groups. I felt like the receivers were our strongest position. We had Darrell Walker, who had a great year before he got hurt. S.J. Green obviously had a great season and went over 10,000 yards, 700 catches. Had a very memorable fall because of those accomplishments. But they were surrounded by guys that also made some really big plays. I thought Armani Edwards had a great season. He's another guy that was over 1,000 yards on the season to join Green and Walker. And Rodney Smith, who spent, I don't remember when he came off the practice squad, but he was on the practice squad for the first, it seems like half of the season. It probably wasn't that long. And then he looked amazing. From September onwards, he was awesome. He was making huge plays. And he's not a guy that, he bounced around the NFL for a while, but he never really had the speed to stick with any one team in the NFL. But I thought the way they were using him early in the season was unfortunate because they were basically using him as this giant man that the faster receivers could run picks behind. And so Smith would go it seemed like every route was a seam, and Green or Walker would square in behind that seam and find that soft spot in the coverage. But near the end of the year, especially when Walker got hurt, they started using Smith as a primary receiver, as a weapon, and he was great. He's a guy that really knows how to high point a ball. He's huge, and so using a guy he's 6'5" and got great reach. He can jump well, go up and find those jump balls. We saw a couple that Prukop and O'Connor both threw their first touchdown passes to Rodney Smith, which of course was memorable because he then turned around and threw their footballs into the lake. But those were both terrific catches, and all you have to do is float it up to him, and you got a guy that's 6'5", who can high point it like that and is a great athlete. The speed doesn't even matter that much. But then, of course, against Hamilton, he has a 75-yard touchdown where he actually looked fast somehow. But that's a guy I would love to have him back. And I think he's probably, I think he might be the fourth best receiver in this group.
Yeah, I agree. I think that.
Do you want to add anybody to this group?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to add somebody, I think what they don't have is they don't have a blazing fast guy that the defense has to be terrified of.
True. We have guys with speed, but no, we don't have any.
And again, these are dream wishes, but I think that if you have a guy who can run that deep over, or at the very least has safeties concerned about him, that's what you want. If you have guys that safeties are just sort of, are looking at and are aware of and react to, that makes it a lot easier for a defense, as opposed to a player who you must always be paying attention to. So in terms of complementary play, I think you'll notice my theme is speed.
Yes.
I want nobody on the team who is not fast offensively. I mean, I just think that's where the game is going, and you should be building a track team, especially in the CFL. Build a track team. I want everybody on the team fast.
See, I think I want a range. I like the receiving core. I like your idea of adding a speedster. I'm fine with adding, finding a guy that's 150 pounds and can run a 4.2. That's great.
Right.
We can certainly use a guy like that.
You're right. Look, I'm okay with Green and coming back. I think the possession stuff's fine. I think that's fine. But so much of it just smacks of boring, stationary football.
But I think guys like Green that you can turn to, you've got an important down, and he's going to find that perfect spot. You know that he's going to be on the same page as the quarterback. I think, I don't know. I feel like you can't. I don't think you can dismiss that. Like I felt like Jimmy Ralph was a guy like that too, not the same level as S.J. Green. And you know, I'm not saying I'd be crushed if Ralph and Green don't come back, but I do think that they add something. I think I would like to see both those guys back. Basically, I'm saying I don't think I need any changes other than I'd be quite happy to bring in a speedster to add to that group.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like I like Chandler Worthy. I thought he was fun to watch at the end of the year. I don't feel like he's don't feel like he's the guy we're talking about, and I don't think Gittins Jr. and Sherrod, any of those guys that we saw play in that Hamilton game. Like I don't feel like any of those guys are. Well, they're definitely not the guy we're talking about. But I'm fine if they're there. But in terms of the starting group that we had, that core, I'm okay bringing all of those guys back and not adding anybody. But if we did add somebody, I do think it's a good idea to add in that blazing fast speedster.
Yeah, and of course you're not going to be able to tear down the whole team.
No, but this is our wish list, and we'll
year.
see what they bring us.
But to my mind, the model of basically stripping a team down to the studs and then building it up again, I think you're like, oh, that's a nice piece of wood. No, throw it in the garbage. That's not what we're building here.
Right. So just to recap, you would like a amazing GM,
yes,
a great head coach.
Well, the amazing GM will take care of everything else.
Okay, but the things you would like that amazing GM to find is
the coach he hires will be amazing.
Okay,
that's what made him amazing. Like a great chef. That's it. Once then you're done. That's it. Everything else is place settings.
And we're bringing in one stud offensive lineman, trying to bring back James Wilder Jr., if possible, or somebody like that.
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, he's the face of some of their advertising, and
he is. He's on billboards. There's a great picture of himself in front of a billboard on his Instagram.
I think it would be good to bring him back. I think, I don't think you can just bring nobody back.
He's a great guy too, and he also does a lot in the community. He was running a variety of different charities and fundraisers this year. I think he's been very visible in Toronto. I would like to see him for those things alone.
I just think it's been proven over the last 10 years that the model of constructing a successful franchise is having a brilliant, unencumbered person at the top and getting rid of everybody who was there before and starting and building up. But
the nice thing is, and this sounds like a big project, and it is, but the nice thing about the CFL is that I feel like this is far more achievable in this league than it is in some other sports and in some other leagues. I feel like CFL football, you can find a lot of these pieces. I don't know if we can check off the boxes on our entire wish list, but I think we can get pretty close if we've got the right guy there.
Yeah, I mean, my dream or my hope, and at some point, if I can find some time, I'd like to write about this, is, I want to be Calgary. I don't want to be, let's win a Grey Cup every 7 years, and then the other 6, we're going to be, the Florida Marlins.
We do win a lot of Grey Cups, though.
I know, and so did the Florida Marlins. Well, and so they win a World Series, and then they're the worst team in the league, and then they win a World Series. And I mean, I would much rather build. Look at Hamilton. I think right down the road is the model of how you can construct a sustainable, winning franchise.
Well, let's see some great cups out of Hamilton before we're willing to crown them.
Well, I guess it depends what you want. I mean, do you want a Grey Cup every 8 years and then 7 years of drought?
No, I don't like that. That's been
right, and that's what I'm saying. I'm saying let's build this thing so it's not just, let's bring in 10 guys in the off season and we can suddenly be good, and then those guys are all gone at the end of the year. I would much rather them. I remember hearing a football analyst talk about, teams are good when they draft a player, you say, oh, that's a blank team player. So they have a model for their player, right? That's a Pittsburgh Steeler. And that's when you've reached something, because that means that you're a team that has a very clear idea of who they are and what they want to do. And I feel like the Argos should be in a position when they sign people like, oh, that guy is an Argo.
That definitely doesn't happen right now.
No, because what's an Argo?
If you draft a player right now and someone
Argo
goes,
is nothing.
There is a Toronto Argo.
Right.
That's
right, exactly. There is no Argo. There's just random bros cashing checks and cold people cheering them on. And, BMO's great. BMO's a great field, and it frustrates me that it is not getting a bigger bite of that summer crowd. And I think
they'll come if we win. If this is, and that's been a problem even with the Grey Cup teams, is that they haven't always been great regular season teams. But if this is a winning regular season team, that stadium will be more full. I don't know if it will be full, but it will be more full. And it's a great atmosphere in there when that place gets packed.
Well, and again, I think going back to your dream of O'Shea, I mean, in some ways, that's the O'Shea model. It's like, if you look at like O'Shea, like, that's an Argo. And
that was an Argo.
Yeah. And that's what they need to get back to. They need to choose a strategy for building the team and stick to it, and just hope to God that they hired a genius and not some random Dutch guy who turns out to be terrible like Winter.
Right. So, on that note, why don't we wrap this up? So we'll take care of the defensive side of the ball the next time we get together. But until then, you've been listening to the X's and Argos podcast. We'll see you next time.